Welcome to my first book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing probably one of the greatest pieces of literature written in the 20th century. And of course, the book is called 1984, published by George Orwell in 1949. And the basic premise of the book is what it's like to live under a totalitarian state. And the basic premise of the book covers the idea of what it would be like to live in a place where the state has total control over what everybody does. You probably already read this book in high school, as I did, and if you hadn't, I would strongly suggest for you to read it because it's a really good book. It's not particularly hard to read, and it shows you the ideas of a man such as George Orwell writing in the 20th century, post-World War II, of what it would be like to live in a situation where the state has total control over everything. Without further ado, let's get into more of the details. The story of 1984 takes place on Earth, of course, with three countries: Oceania, East Asia, and Eurasia. And within the plot of the story, Oceania is at war with Eurasia, or so it would say that they're at war with each other. And within Oceania, you have a one-party rule, which is called INGSOC, or English socialism, which is essentially the most abject form of totalitarian rule that anyone could possibly imagine. A one-party bureaucracy overlooks what everybody does. And the mascot of the party is none other than Big Brother, which is very analogous to something like Uncle Sam. Big Brother represents the ideals of what the party is. It represents the ideals that people that are part of the party should strive to be part of. And our story takes place in London with our protagonist, Winston Smith. And Winston works within the Ministry of Truth, which is a state-run department that focuses on rewriting history. It focuses on propagandizing history so that it aligns with the party's ideals. And within Oceania, there's a common enemy of the party, which is none other than Emmanuel Goldstein, who is attempting to lead his revolution against the party and overthrow them. And then the focus of the story continues from once you understand Emmanuel Goldstein and the revolution. Winston tries to understand the truth of the world. He tries to find a way to also overthrow the government and overthrow the party in order to bring true freedom to people. Because the world of Oceania was not always like this. The story talks about a time when Winston could remember a time when he was a child, when the party was never there, and he could remember true freedom. And then at some point, the party came together and took total control of essentially the entire world. At some point during the story, Winston will find for himself that maybe everything he's come to believe up until that point has been a lie. What he's been led to believe up until that point about the war with Eurasia could be a lie, or that the war with East Asia could also be a lie. Maybe there is no Eurasia. Maybe there is no East Asia. Maybe there is no Emmanuel Goldstein. Maybe there is no revolution. This could all have been a ploy and could have all been more propaganda in order to wean out the people like Winston who are trying to uprise against the government. And then at the end of the book, Winston will have been brainwashed to not only be obedient to the party, but he will also have been tortured completely to be subservient and to love the party and to love Big Brother. And then by the closing of the book, we'll see that Winston is happy. The point of 1984 comes from the context of someone like Orwell, who's writing post-World War II of what essentially would have likely been rule under the Nazi regime. He essentially took that idea of what could have been and took it to its logical conclusion of what a total totalitarian state would have looked like. And so basically he creates the story of what happens when you give the state too much power. What happens when you give the people that are making the decisions of how you're going to live too much power. And what you end up with is INGSOC, or English socialism. You end up with something like the Ministry of Truth that's going to rewrite history and to tell lies. You have something like the famous Ministry of Love, which gives rise to something like the Thought Police that focuses on repression and brutalizing the people to make sure that they abide by the party's rules. And it gives rise to something like thought crimes, that just the idea of thinking of something is criminal in its intent. And so the point of 1984 is not what happens when you give the wrong people too much power, but what happens when you give anyone too much power. And so those are my thoughts on the greatest book that I could read that's fiction, 1984. I would highly recommend anyone who hasn't read it to read it. And now I would like to know what you guys think about my review of 1984. I want to know if you guys have read it and what you thought of it, and if it was similar to what I thought of it. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.